Hi everyone, we are live on day 17 and I'm Gaurav and today we'll be learning about ES6 modules and front-end tooling and we'll be including Webpack and Vite. Okay, so let's get started with today's class. The first thing that we will be looking into is a topic that we looked at yesterday, and we were having some issues with the update command. So let's see what the problem was and how to make the update command work properly. So I have this package.json file available with me, and let's install Lodash. Okay, so npm, let me just zoom this a bit for you guys. Okay, yeah. So we have npm I for install, and we want to install Lodash, and we want to install the 4.0.0 version. All right. So it has installed this package, and you can see an entry for Lodash at under the dependencies object, right? And then if you remember, this caret represents that it will only update the minor and major versions when we use the update command. So let's try and update this to the latest version. All right, so if we took if we take a look at which is the latest version, we'll go to npm.js and let's just search for uh, Lodash, right? And you can see that this is the latest version 4.17.21. Okay, now since we have this caret sign available with us, it will only try and update the minor and patch versions. It will not update to the next major version. So let's make use of the npm update command. So I will say npm update, and then I will pass the hyphen hyphen save flag, so that whatever update it is doing, it is making sure that that update is also reflected in the package.json file. This is the thing which we were missing yesterday. We were just running npm update, but if we do npm update hyphen hyphen save, it will save the version and make the update in package.json. So let me run this command. So when we run this command, you can see that it has successfully updated the Lodash package to its latest version. Okay, so the only missing thing from yesterday was that we were not using this hyphen hyphen save flag. So the update was happening, but it was not being reflected in package.json file. Okay, so in order to do that, we just need to pass this hyphen hyphen save flag. All right. Okay, so now let's move on to the topic that we will be covering today. Let me close this and let me bring in VS Code. All right. So today we'll be learning about ES6 modules, which is a very useful feature, and you'll be using it ahead for all the development activities that we'll be doing in this boot camp. So make sure you are paying attention and try your best to understand this topic. All right, so we have these let me just close this for the time being. Yeah, so we have these files, right? Index html and main.js. Let me just zoom out slightly. Okay, all right, so generally suppose we have these files. Okay, main.js, let me include it over here inside the script. tag, and let me specify main.js, and let's add, let's create another file, say some file.js, and suppose there are two variables inside this file. So let's say there's a public variable. Okay, the value is 10, and there is a private variable. I'm just giving the names right now. Okay, now suppose I want to use these two variables inside my main.js file, um, and I want to log these two variables. Okay, so what I will do is I will just say, private variable and public variable like this. Okay, and in order for this to work, I need to ensure that this script is loaded. So I will say script and set the source to some file.js, right? And now if we just let me add a tag as well, ES6 modules. All right, so let's open this in the browser. Okay, so if you take a look at the console, we can see that the values 20 and 10 are being logged. All right, so in order for the sharing to work, we had to load this file, and whatever variables were available in this file, since we wanted to use them in main.js, it was possible because you know there is no restriction on accessing variables, right? Inside another file, the only requirement is that that file should be loaded before the file in which you're trying to use those variables. So that is why we loaded some file.js first, and then we loaded main.js. Suppose I change this order. Okay, you can see that it is no longer able to find the reference to the variable. That's because this file was loaded first, then this statement was executed. Now at this point of time, these two variables have not been created and loaded into the memory. It happens in the next step, right? So by the time the script has finished executing, and then it is moving on to this part, right? um, so that is why we do not have access to these two variables, since they have been declared and initialized in this file, right? So the ordering is important for this to work. uh, Now what I want to do is I want to have some sort of restriction. What I want is that this private variable, it should not be accessible inside main.js. Okay, uh, right now there is no restriction at all. So one of the ways by which I can do this is that I can use something known as an IFE. Okay, IFFE, okay. It stands for immediately invoked function expression. All right, so we had learned quite a while back what is a function expression, right? So a function expression basically means that you're storing the reference of a function in a variable. Okay, so let's say we create a reference to this. So we'll say let public variable, public props, something like this. Public properties equals, we'll give a function over here. And since we want to invoke it, right? So we will wrap this in parentheses, and then we want to execute this function. So we will just pass this, use these parentheses to immediately invoke this function. All right. So this way is known, the syntax of, um creating a function right there and then executing it on the spot. This is known as if we immediately invoked function expression. Now what we will do over here is we'll just return an object. Okay. Uh, let's check out what is the value that we're getting when we log public props. Okay. So you can see that we're getting an empty object, right? Now, the first thing that we used is an immediately invoked function expression. So, this function was executed on the spot, and then it's returning an empty object. Now, we wanted to place this restriction, right, to make something publicly accessible and have a restriction on the private variable. So, what I will do is move these variables inside this, ify, and just return the thing that I want to give access to. So I just want to give access to, suppose I want to call this variable as, value, for example, and set the, and assign this to the public variable. All right. Now, when I want to access this inside main, right, so it will be accessible using an object which we are calling as, public props, right? So we'll say public props dot value. So now we only have access to this variable and we have successfully hidden, the private variable. Maybe we are using it for some other purpose inside this thing, right? So this way of, uh, restricting the access and, making only certain parts available. So this, particular pattern is known as the object revealing pattern. All right. But if you notice that, just to make something accessible and to, restrict something, okay, there is noise coming in the video. What does that mean? Are you able to hear me clearly, or okay, so no noise is coming. All right, so most of you are saying that it's clear. Now it's clear. Okay. All right, if it's clear, then I'm happy because you guys are able to hear me properly. Uh, if I'm speaking fast, then it's making noise. Okay. Uh, Fine, I will speak slowly then. Uh, Anyways, I hope it's better now. But were you guys able to understand whatever I was speaking in the meantime, even with the noise? Or do I need to repeat some of the things? Just let me know. Okay. All right. So, um, we were looking at this pattern, right? Object revealing pattern. And what we want to do is, so if you take a look, we had to write quite a, substantial amount of code just to restrict the access. So there's a better way of doing all of these things in ES6, and the functionality that allows us to do these kind of things and much more, uh, is available to us using modules. So let's take a look at how we create a module in ES6. So the first thing is that uh, we'll go to our, index.html file. let me remove this, or rather I'll just comment this out for now. And then all we need to do is we will just say type equals module. Okay, so this is just telling the the browser that now this file, you need to treat this as a module, and I'll get to all the things that we can do using a module. So what a ES6 module allows us to do is that it allows us to structure our code and share the functions, variables, classes, whatever is there inside a module with other files or other modules in the in the project. So when you want to share something, right, you export that thing. That thing can be a variable, it can be a function, it can be a class, and the person or the file that needs to not the person, and the thing that needs to consume the functionality that you are exporting, they consume it using the import statement. So let's take a look at that. So here what I wanted to do is we wanted to basically, I'll just comment this part out so that when the code is shared with you guys, you have access to all of this. So let me just bring these two variables outside. Okay, so what I wanted was that this variable is publicly available and this variable is not. Okay, so since I want to expose this variable, I will say export let public variable equal to 10. Now I want to use this over here. All right, so what I will say over here is that I will say import, okay, public variable from dot slash some file dot js. This is the file from where I want to import this variable, right? And now I want to log this variable in the console. So I will just save this, and you can see that we have access to this variable. Now if I try to access this variable over here in this file, you can see that it's giving me a reference error, right? Even though this variable is just sitting there on this file, since we have specified the type as module, all right, and we're giving the entry point to the main module, okay, which is main.js. So there's a single entry point that we are giving, and in turn, right, we are importing some functionality which is coming from some file.js, and we have imported this variable, public variable, and we also tried to use the private variable which is there in this file. Now since this variable has not been exported, we are getting this reference error. Suppose I export this as well, right? Let private variable equal to 20. Okay, and now if we do a is not defined, yeah. So in order to use this, I need to import it, right? So now you can see I have access to both 10 and 20. If I remove the export statement once again, you can see that it's giving us this error that the requested module uh, some file.js does not provide an export named private variable. So it's pretty clear that this thing is accessible and this one is not. Okay, so this is one of the main features of modules, that you have the ability to control the access of certain things, the things that you want to reuse. So I can basically reuse this functionality. Suppose I create another file, and I want to reuse some function, right? So let's create a function over here, function, some useful function, okay, And let's just say console.log. This is a useful function. Okay, and I want to export this, so I will just say export function, useful function, and I'll make and I can use it over here, so I can just say console.log another useful function, right? And it is being imported from this file and being used over here. And let me just get rid of this, right? And similarly, if I want to use the same variable inside this file, which is public variable like this. So wherever I want to uh, I want to reuse something, so it's very easy for me to just import that particular functionality and make use of it inside another file, right? Like this. So when we are saying that this particular file is a module, uh, whatever we are creating inside this file, the scope of that variable and the scope of that function is restricted to this module or this file. Okay, each module is represented with a file, okay, in ES6. Okay, and so only when I want to expose something outside of its scope, outside the scope of the module, I can make use of the export statement, and it lets me expose that functionality outside of that module. And when I want to use that functionality in some other file, I just make use of the import statement, tell the functionality that I want to use and from where I want to use it. All right. And we can use multiple functionalities like this. Okay, so you can have multiple things that you want to use from a file, and you provide those values using commas. You can separate them using commas, right? So this is one way of reusing something. And so like I mentioned, ES6 modules, they allow us to structure our code so that it's very convenient for us to reuse and share functionality across different files. Okay, and the other thing is that there are different types of different ways of exporting something. So the first way that we looked at is the named exports, right? Okay, these are named exports. There's another type of export known as the default export. So suppose what I want to do is I create another function, default export, for example, and let's just say that it just logs to the console. This is a default export. All right, and then over here I can just say export default export. All right, and then when I want to use this, I can just say import. So for example, I just want to use that function. Okay, I do not have this, I do not want to use this public variable, so for the meantime I'll just comment this out, and I can just say import abc from dot slash some file.js, and then I will just say abc like this, some file.js. Okay, so now it's telling us that this is a default export. This thing is being logged, right? And let's go back to the console. abc is not a function. Is this some error that we are getting? um, when we're trying to use this as a function. Suppose I try to because different browsers have different uh, support for the modules, right? S- so right now it's giving us an error because it's not understanding what this is. It's not expecting this to be a function. That's why we're getting this error. Suppose I export default to say I get rid of this export statement, and over here I just write export default. Hang on a sec, I made a mistake over here actually. That is why it was not working properly. I called the function right here. That was not the intended behavior. And now when we are saying import abc from some file.js, and when I'm using abc like this, so it's logging this statement, right? It's calling that function, and that function, when it is called, it is logging this log statement, right? So basically for a default export, you don't need to use the curly brackets, right? And the other thing is, since it's the default export, you can name it anything. So you can call it uh, XYZ, for example. This still works. You can call it as default export like this. So any name you can give to the default export, and you don't need to specify curly braces when you're trying to do a default export. Okay. And similarly, I can import multiple things. I can import the default export as well as the named import together. So suppose we have this useful function, right? I want to use that. So I will just import useful function like this. Now this way, whenever we are specifying something within curly brackets, right? These are named exports. And now I can say useful function. And if we go to our browser, it is logging this is useful function, right? And the difference between the two is that you can have only one default export, but you can have multiple named exports, right? So suppose I have let another variable equals 30 for example, and I say export over here, right? And if I use it over here, another variable, and let's just log that to the console, another variable like this. So you can see that it's we're able to access multiple we're able to import multiple named exports, and it's just not possible with a default export. You can only use it once, whereas in case of named exports, you can import multiple of those. So these are the two types of exports, and we also looked at how we can import them separately, or use import the default export as well as the named imports together in a single line, or you can have it like this also. So import default export from dot slash some file dot js, right? And here we can have import these from same file.js, some file.js. So you can have multiple entries like this. So this is also allowed. Now suppose you wanted to so we have this another file.js, right? And it has some functionality. It also has a useful function. Okay, so function useful function, and then we'll just say useful function from another file. Okay, and we want to export this. So another way that you can export, named imports is that you just write a export statement at the bottom, and you can just specify the name of the variable or function that you want to export. Okay, so this is another syntax of doing the same thing. Instead of writing export over here, I'm writing a single export over here, and then I can have multiple values over here, and those values can be separated using commas. Okay, now what we want to do here is let me just remove these things for the time being. Okay, and we'll use it over here. So import from dot slash another file dot js. Now if you notice, both of the functions have the same name. Now which one is it going to call? It's saying that useful function has already been declared. Now if two functions have the same name, right, we have an option to rename the import as something else using the as keyword. So I'll just say useful uh, from another, for example. Okay, now I've given an alias. If I want to use this useful function, which might have a different functionality, but I want to use it, and both of these functions had the same name, so I gave an alias, and now I can just say useful function from another. Okay, and you can see that it's giving us this log statement, useful function from another. So using the as keyword, you can give an alias to named import. Okay, so this is another way of importing a particular variable and using an alias, calling it something else. Now suppose what I want to do is we have been doing all of these individual imports, right? Suppose I want everything in one go. Okay, all the named imports together. So what I can do is I can say import star as some file. So once again I'm giving an alias, and when I use asterisk or star, it is importing everything together and storing that inside this variable. So let me just call it, say, common import, or let me just call this as everything, for example, from some file dot js, and let's just log this everything. All right, and let's just comment these lines. Okay, start. Yeah, I need to give a, as you can see, it gave me an error for relative path, right? So whatever file that you're using, its path needs to be relative to the place from where you're trying to access the file, right? So you can see that we have access to you know everything. So when I want to use another variable, right, I can say everything dot another variable, everything dot default, everything dot useful function. Okay, so the way I use if I want to club everything into a single object, I can use the star or the asterisk notation and put everything inside a variable. Now when I want to do this, right, what I can say is everything dot default for the default export to work, right? So this is the default export, it's giving us that. So similarly, when I want to use useful function, I will say everything dot useful function. So you can see that it's giving us this, right? And what is it telling us? Useful from another variable is not Yeah, so I want to log this value, right? So once again, this is available in everything, and all right, so we're getting another variable as well, right? So using this syntax, you can get all of the exported things inside a single variable, and you can access inside it creates an object, and you can access everything, all the exported things using that variable, and you access using the dot property on that. So just how a regular object works, it behaves in that fashion, right? So it imports everything. And yeah, so these are some of the basics associated with modules, um, that I wanted to cover in this lesson. There are many other functionalities. You can go through those in the link which has been shared, and we'll also be learning more functionalities as we progress further. Um, so this is just to get you started and get you acquainted with this topic, but we'll be using it quite a lot going ahead, and the other functionalities we'll learn as and when we build more projects and work on other topics. All right, so this is the basic that I wanted to cover. Okay, now the next thing that we will be learning is Webpack, and the reason that we'll be learning it is because the support for this, okay, right now it has a very good support. ES6 modules are supported by all major browsers, but just a few years ago, this was not possible. Even though this functionality was there, available in JavaScript, browsers did not support this, so it was not possible for you to use import and export, like this. And even some of the newer features of JavaScript, which are, so generally whenever a new JavaScript feature is available, it's available in the language, but browsers take some time to implement that language specific feature. So sometimes maybe Chrome has implemented it, but Firefox has not implemented a new feature, or maybe it works in Chrome and Firefox but not in Safari. So this was the case with the modules as well. So that was the time when we relied on external tooling such as Webpack, which allowed us to use such a functionality. And Webpack also has many other features, so we'll just take a look at some of the features and how we can do the same thing using Webpack, right? So let's get started with that. I'll just minimize this for the time being. Let me open let me create a new file. Okay, so I'll just do it over here, and let's just call this folder as day 17 Webpack. All right, I'll open this in VS Code. Okay, and let's get started with this. So Webpack is a module bundler, right? Uh, so by default, it allows us to use this, module like structure, even though if your browser doesn't support it, you can still use all of these import, export, and related functionality, because it makes files available as modules, and you can bundle all of the modules together into a single output file. So let's take a look at how we can do all of that using Webpack. So the first thing that we will do is we will say um, npm init. Okay, and we'll just say npm init -y to just initialize it with the default package.json. Okay, day 17 webpack, and yeah, it has created all of these things by default. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is we want to install webpack, right? So we'll say npm I hyphen save dev webpack, because this is a development dependency, right? This isn't something which our project needs, right? The functionality of the project does not need webpack. It is something which will enhance the developer experience, right? It will help us in the development. So that is why I am installing this as a dev dependency. And in order to use webpack from the command line, we need webpack CLI. So I am installing that as well. Okay, so you can install multiple node npm packages by specifying them, and you can separate them with a space. So this is the first package that will be installed, and this is the other package which will be installed. So let me do that now. Okay, so it's basically downloading that package from the net, and it has installed these two packages as a dev dependency, right? And you can see a node modules folder has been created, and it's a pretty, decent sized node modules folder. Okay, now the next thing that we want to do is let's add those files which we had over here. So let me just copy all of these and paste them here. And while I'm at it, let me create a source folder and move everything inside of the source folder. Actually, the index.html, let me just keep it outside for now. Okay, and the JavaScript code I'll move inside the source folder. And it's just giving me a message to update the imports, because earlier the path for the imports was directly coming from there. Yeah, now everything is inside the source folder, right? Now we want to achieve the same functionality that we had done using ES6 modules, but without using the script type as module. Okay, because back in the day this was not supported in most browsers. So let's do that now. So what I will do is, in order to use Webpack, I'll also create a config file, okay, for Webpack, which allows me to inform certain things to Webpack. So let's create that webpack.config.js. This is expecting some configuration info. So I will say module.exports. Now this is a syntax for exporting something. This is a different syntax of doing the same import and export, but it just has a different way of usage. And this is how the Webpack config uh, information is made available to the Webpack CLI, right? So we're just saying module.exports, and we're providing this an object, and let's define an entry point. So the entry point for our file is src /src, right? So inside the source folder, this is the entry point. Okay, this is the main module. So similar to what we had done uh, here, right, where we were saying that the main mod, the entry point is main.js and its type is module. So just like how we had only specified one single file, similar to that, that is what we are doing over here. We are saying that not this one, this one over here. We are saying that we're telling Webpack that our entry point is src and main.js. This is our entry point, and similar to that, let's define an output. So this is an object, so we are creating a output file because it bundles everything together, right? So the name of the output file is app.js, and we want to create this output file inside the dist folder. So we'll just provide a path over here, and we need to call this as file name, and we will say path dot join. Okay, and so this path is a special function which is available, provided by node, and it is there by default whenever your project is configured using npm. So we will just say require. This is another way of basically um, importing some variable, but this is the node.js way of doing it. So I will just say, rather it's the older node.js way of doing it. Even now, in the recent versions of node, you can also use import and export, but I will just use this way now. So let's just say const path equals require path like this, and here we'll just say path.join whatever is the directory, current directory, underscore underscore directory. Inside this we want to create a folder called dist. Okay, now I want to run this command, right? I want webpack to, let me give this another name. Let's just call this as webpack. Okay, so using the configuration file, I'm giving some information to Webpack. I'm telling Webpack what is the entry point, what is the output that you need to create, and where you need to create it. So let's try and run this. Since Webpack is a command, it's available inside this bin folder, right? Webpack. And in order to use Webpack from the command line, we make use of the Webpack CLI. Okay, that is why we had installed this package, which allows us to use the Webpack command from the command line. So in order to access this Webpack, we need to say node modules, give the path of the Webpack command, right? So it is present inside bin, and we'll say Webpack like this. Let me minimize all of these folders, and let's execute this. And you can see that it's giving us some warning, right? So there's this mode option. Since we did not specify any value, it's defaulting it to the production, right? So it created a dist folder, and inside that we have this file, right? app.js. So this has been created automatically. Okay, and since we want to use this now, if you see that it's telling us that the mode is production, since we did not specify anything in the configuration file, it has defaulted the mode to production. And whenever the mode is production, it will try and you know remove all of the spaces, and it will try to minify the code. Okay, so this process of removing all the spaces and putting everything in a single line, so this is what our code was looking like, right? We had three different files. Now instead it has compressed everything into a single file, and it has gotten rid of all of the spaces. Okay, so this process is known as minification, and it happens by default when the mode is production. And the reason we minify code is that, you know whenever a file is being used, it is downloaded from the server, and the download takes some time depending on the size of the file, right? So when we get rid of the spaces, we're basically reducing the size of the file. Okay, so this is something which happens by default in Webpack. And suppose now I set the mode to development, right? And if I run the same command again, okay, you can see that it has created a app.js, and all of the things which it had compressed, all of those things are not there anymore, right? So in development mode, you do not the minification doesn't happen basically. Okay, and let's move our index.html inside the dist folder as well. And since we need to have the same functionality that we had in this version, right, we need to include the output file which was generated. So let's do that over here, and here we'll just say import app.js, and let's try and view this file in the browser. And you can see that this webpack has been loaded. If we go to the developer tools, you can see that it is printing all of these statements that we had over here. Everything is working as expected, how it was working before, right, with the ES6 modules. So all of that functionality we have been able to achieve using Webpack, right? Hang on a sec. Yeah. So all of the import and export statements, they are working over here, even though we have not used ES6 module type of file. It's a regular JavaScript file, but it has all of the code which is there by which is provided by Webpack, all of, and it is basically allowing us to import and export the things, the variables and functions that we need, and everything is working as just how it was working before. So this was one of the main use cases where we were using Webpack to support module level uh, imports and exports. And at the same time, it is allowing us to create a build, right? So what is known by as a build is the is the website that you will actually deploy and host, right? So whenever you're testing something out, whenever you're building something, okay, that is the development mode, right? You do all of those things in the development mode. Whenever you want to ship a website, make it available to everyone on the internet, so that is the production mode. That is where where you're making something available publicly. So that is the production mode. And in that scenario, you don't want the user to easily see all of the code, and the performance should be fast, right? So that is why it does things like minification and a few other optimizations, so that the behavior is different. And you can see that when I ran it in production mode, which was also the default behavior, it has done a minification, right? uh, and it has also renamed some of the variables over here, to D, L, T, L, and all of that, just so that the variable name does not take up a lot of space, right? So it does these sort of optimizations when you want to make something available in production, right? So this is, one level of thing that you can do. Now suppose I want to install an external dependency. So what I can do is I can say npm I lodash. Okay, so I have installed lodash. Now I want to use this within the project, right? So suppose what I want to do is I want to do something like this: document dot create element. I want to create an article tag. So const element equals article. Okay. Then what I want to do is I want to make use of a function which is available in Lodash. So I will say import underscore from Lodash. Okay. So I just installed Lodash and now I want to use some functionality of Lodash. Uh, this is the default import, right? Which Lodash must have provided, right? So I can call it anything, right? So I'm calling it as underscore. And then what I want to do is I want to say element dot text content equals underscore dot join. It is a function which is available in Lodash, and I'm providing it an array. Hello Webpack, and I want to join these two using a space, right? And what I want to do is I want to do document dot body dot append child element like this, and let's save this. Now I have made some modification to my main.js, right? In order for this change to reflect, I need to rebuild this. And instead of, executing this command again and again, what we can do is we can go to our package.json, create a section for scripts. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to create a script called build. Okay. And over here, I want to say Webpack. That's it. Okay. So when try, if I want to run this script section, I want to run this command, right? Instead of doing all of this, I can just say npm run this script, right? Which is called build. So npm run build like this. Okay. This is called scripts. Okay. And now, what is it telling us? Can't resolve Lodash. Okay. Did I misspell something? Yeah, I misspelled this. It is Lodash, not Load. Okay. So it's giving us an error that it was not able to find this module. Okay. And let's see, what is the error now? Lodash in source. Okay, give me a sec. Am I missing something? Package.json. What is the problem? Duplicate object. Oh, okay. The script section was already available, so that is why it's ignoring that. Okay, let me get rid of this and let's try this again. So we are still getting an error. Give me a second. Can't resolve Lodash. Okay. Let me just check. Okay, so Lodash. Okay, hang on. I installed something else. It should have been npm I Lodash. All right. And in main, I'm importing Lodash, and then I need to just build it once again. So I can just say npm run build, and now you can see that it has gone through all of the uh, files, and we have access to if we take a look inside the dist folder, it has its size has increased significantly because it has imported the entire Lodash library. And let's take a look in the browser. We can see the statement now, hello webpack, and this statement was generated using Lodash, and we use the join function. Right now, if I just set the mode back to development and let's run this command again. Okay, take a look at app.js now. It did not perform all of that minification. So you can see that the entire Lodash library has been loaded. So the only functionality that I was interested in was the join function, right? So another fun thing that you can do is, instead of importing the entire library, you can just import the part which you need to use. And let me call this, let's import join from lodash/join, right? Internally, if you take a look at Lodash within from the node modules over here, so even it is using module level imports and exports. And here you will find a file called uh, join.js. And if you see over here, it says module.exports join, and there's this join functionality basically. Okay, and instead of using underscore dot join, we can just say join now. Let's run the npm run build command. And if we take a look at the dist folder and take a look at app.js, you can see it's much smaller, right? Because it's just now it has just imported the join functionality from Lodash. So this is another benefit of using module level uh, you know another benefit of using modules in JavaScript is that you can if the package that you have installed supports this functionality, if it has been modularized, right, you can just use that particular functionality, and Webpack has the intelligence to just access that part and create a bundle using just that part. So what is the advantage of using this bundle is that instead of manually adding all of those scripts, right? So if you were to use Webpack without using a module, you would specify the path of Webpack. You would have another script tag over here. You would specify the source as https colon slash slash paths to Lodash on the internet, okay, .com, whatever. So whatever was the publicly available path, or the CDN URL for Lodash, you would specify it over here. And what Webpack allows is that it simplifies this process for the developer. You just need to install the package and use it in the file where it is needed, and it automatically take cares of bundling all of those things together into a single file, and you're just importing that using that single file over here. You don't need to do all of those additional uh, imports and exports. And another thing which is happening over here is that if you remember, when we were trying to access a variable, say this public variable inside main.js without the module way of doing it, we were the order of in which the scripts was loaded, that was important, right? So some file.js had to be loaded, its script had to be loaded before main.js, right? So the reason was that uh, this script would get executed first, and then the second script would execute and the variable would be created. But since we are using the variables before this, script was executed, we are getting errors. So by default, modules take care of all of those things, right? Whatever we are importing, that particular script is loaded first. So you no longer have to bother about the order of these scripts whenever you're using a module, an ES6 module within your project. So the order of the files is no longer important. So it's another good thing for the developer. It's saving one headache, that you no longer need to arrange your scripts in a certain way, in a certain order. Tools like Webpack and the default ES6 module, they take care of all of these things, right? um, so we just use the join functionality, and it's still working, right? And the size is significantly lower compared to before. Now let's look at another topic. uh, Suppose we want to use a CSS file within our project, right? So let's do that. Let's create a CSS file, style.css, and let's say we have a class over here. Let's call it as blue, and let's say color royal blue. Okay, and we want to apply this uh, to the element which we have created. So we'll say element dot class list dot add blue. All right, so using Webpack you can also import CSS as a module. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So we'll say import dot slash style dot css. Let's save this. Let's run the build command, right? Since we have updated, we need to run the build command. Now it's telling us that you are loading a file which is CSS, but Webpack does not understand how to load this file. So the thing is, by default, Webpack only understands, JavaScript and JSON files. For other file types, we need to use a special functionality known as loaders. So loaders allow Webpack to understand uh, different other, file types, and we can then use those files as modules and import them over here directly, right? So let's see how we can make Webpack understand that it needs to load the CSS file as a module as well. So in order to do that, we need to install a loader. So we will say npm install hyphen hyphen save dev style loader and CSS loader, right? So style loader, so that all the styles are understood, and CSS for loading the CSS file. So let's install those. And since this is once again just a development dependency, those have been added over here, right? And this was a package which I had installed accidentally, LOADSH, right? We don't need this, so I'll just say npm remove load dash. Okay, yeah. And you can see that these two have been included inside dev dependencies. Now I need to tell Webpack that you need to also load CSS files. So I need to specify another entry over here called module, and then I need to define some rules. So rules is an array, and then what I want to say is that the rule that we want to test is that we want to test whether all of the CSS files which end with a CSS extension are Webpack scans through all of the CSS files in our folder, and it can load all of those files. So whichever files have the CSS extension, okay, just one sec, and I'm using a regular expression over here. So using a regular expression, you can, search for certain patterns. So what I'm doing is I'm searching for all of the files which have a CSS extension, and I'm using this I so that the name of the file, and suppose I have a file with which is style.css like this. Okay, so to support case insensitive search, so provide this /I flag. So this is something which is known as a regular expression or a regex. You can go through this. There are different sites available where you can learn about this. So uh, one of the good sites which you can use is known as regxr. You can go to this website, and so this is a pattern, right? So it is from A to Z. So know highlight all the so basically it is selecting all the words which have the letters from A to Z capitalized, and we are picking up, this plus indicates one or more occurrences, right? So the words which begin with capital letters are being picked by this regular expression. So this is capitalized, this is capitalized, and all of the things which are in lower cases are being ignored, right? Suppose what I want is I also want lower cased words to be considered as well. So instead of A or Z, I can specify another. I can say A to Z capital letters, or A to Z lowercase letters, and now you can see all of the lowercase letters are also being matched by this regex, right? So you can check out all of the patterns. You can go through the reference over here and play around with this, because regex is something you might come across in web development. So we just use this regular expression to target all the files within our folders which have the CSS extension. And then what I want to do is when these when these files, when this rule is being applied, we want to use the you know uh, style loader and the CSS loader for all of these type of files. And now when I build it, right, npm run build. Now, since I have added these loaders, now Webpack is able to understand that whenever I am going through a CSS file, these loaders need to be used. And using these loaders, I am able to import this CSS as a module. Okay. And we had defined this style, right? Color blue. And we have added this to our element over here. Now let's go back to the document, and you can see that this element, uh, if we inspect it, right, it has the class blue applied to it, and it's getting this styling information, right? So we did not explicitly, if you take a look at the head tag, we did not have a link statement which was importing that file. Just by using this import statement, we were able to import this particular style within this file, and use a class which is available inside style.css. Okay, so this is how you can import other file extensions apart from JS or a JSON file in Webpack. So you can also load images, import them over here, text files, sound files, SVG files. All of that is possible using the correct loader. You just need to specify the correct loader. So if you go through the Webpack documentation, the links have been shared with you in the Devsnest assignment associated with this session. So just go through those to you know take a look at the other loaders which are available. And let's take a quick break over here and then we'll look at a few more functionalities. So if you have any doubts, you can watch. If you have any doubts, you can ask me right now. We're just having a short break. There's a question in the chat. You came across this bootcamp only today? Yeah, all the videos are available in on this channel. We go live every day on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And all the videos are publicly available. To find out more about the bootcamp, you can check out the description in this video. You can register for this bootcamp. It is completely free for you. The only investment that is required from your side is that you need to practice all the things that we are learning over here. You need to invest your time and practice the concepts that we are learning over here. That's it. So there's a question, how is the CSS available? So it's available as this inline style tag, if you can see over here. We'll be starting Tailwind in the next session, okay? And after this session, we'll be building a large project using vanilla JS, HTML, and CSS, and we'll be using a build tool, and we'll be using modules and everything, right? So this is where it is being loaded. As I told you, in the HTML file, the style tag is having that class, right? So Strain, you can, I don't know if you can see the screen or not. Yeah, it's a bit complex to understand. That is what Kshitiz is saying. Yeah, it's a bit complex, but we'll be using this quite a lot going ahead, especially in React. So you'll get familiar with it, whatever we are learning today. So don't worry about it if you're not able to understand it right now. With time, you will, since you'll use it regularly, you will get good at it and things will make sense. Okay. So you can ask your more doubts. If you have more doubts, you can ask right now. Um, okay. So yesterday we learned about SAS, right? And we had to write, we had to set up certain things, you know, to make it work. So Webpack, also using Webpack, we can, yeah, sorry about that. So using Webpack, we can also load a, SAS file. Let's take a look at how we can do that. So to make it work, what we can do is, let me just clear out all of this. We can say npm I SAS loader. So to make it understand, uh, to load SCSS file, we need to do that. And we also need to install SAS, right? And let's just save all of this as a dev dependency. Okay. And let's call this, let's change the extension for this from CSS to SCSS. And suppose what I want to do is I want to make use of a variable now, color uh, royal blue. And here I can make use of a variable now. I can just say dollar color like this. And in order for Webpack to understand this, I need to specify the SAS loader over here. And I also need to, update the test so that I not just test for CSS files, also test for files which have the, uh, you know, SCSS extension. So let's modify this slightly. All right. So I am using a regex which targets either SASS or SCSS. uh, these are the things that I want to target. And now inside my main.js I can import a SCSS file. Let's build this. Okay, wrong command. Let's build this, and if we do a page refresh, you can see that you know it has access to that SCSS file, and we're able to use the SCSS way of doing things. Suppose I change this color to green now. So I have made a modification I need to build once again. And once it has been built, you can see that the color has been changed to green, right? So we can see that our SCSS file is working as well. The SAS loader is taking care of, automatically converting this into a CSS file, because that is what is understood by the browser. So we don't have to take care of, executing a command which converts the SCSS file to CSS file and then link it. All of that is happening implicitly when we use the, SAS loader. All right. So this is the benefit of using a front-end tooling like Webpack. It is, allowing us to do all of this setup. And if a new developer joins, they can just, run the command, add all of these files. They don't need to, you know how all of these things are happening behind the scenes. Somebody who has already done the configuration, the next person who uses this project, for them it's very easy to start working on this project, because the initial configuration has been done. You just need to create files and add the functionality. All right. So that is where these tools are really helpful. Okay. um and another thing that we can do is, so suppose I want to, you know, uh, have another file, and I want to use that functionality within, main. What I can do is I can have multiple, entry points. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So we can specify this as a, you know, we can change this into an object. Let's call this as our main. Okay. And we can have another entry point known as, say, sum, for example. And the path for this is dot slash src slash some file.js. And what we want to do is, we have multiple entry points, right? We want to get a single bundle, rather not a single bundle. For each of these we want to get a separate bundle now. So what we will do here is say, name dot bundle dot js. Okay, let's run the build command. And now if we take a look at the dist folder, it has created this main bundle.js and some bundle.js. And in order to use both of these files, what I have to do is I need to, add both of these files. app.js is no longer needed, right? So I will say main bundle.js, then some bundle.js. And if we refresh this, you can see that it's still working, but we have just, split the entry points. And what you notice over here is that, I had to manually update the index.html file So this can get quite, cumbersome going ahead. Suppose you have multiple, files. As the code grows, you will have to remember every time that you create a new file and you want to make it available. uh, you want to have access to that separately, you will have to manually come and modify the index.html file. So there's a way to automate all of these things. We can make use of another functionality known as plugins. So plugins allow us to add some functionality. It can be either automatically generate a file, copy a file from one place to another. So with the help of plugins we can do such a thing. So let's take a look at a plugin which solves this problem where we had to manually update all of these, our index file whenever a new entry point was added within our webpack. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can add a plugin. So let's install a plugin called HTML Webpack Plugin. So npm I hyphen save dev HTML Webpack Plugin. Okay, so we have installed this. Once it's installed, it should be available over here. You can see that it's available, and we need to inform our config that we are using a plugin now. So let's add an entry for plugin. It's an array, and here we need to basically use that plugin. So we will say const html html webpack plugin equals require HTML Webpack plugin, like this. So we are getting this plugin in an object in this variable, and inside the plugins config option we will say new HTML Webpack plugin, and this accepts a configuration object. So we can specify a title over here, whatever is the title that we want to give to this document, right? So that we can specify over here. So let's just say Webpack demo. And now if we try to build the command, right? Suppose I delete this. Okay, and now if I run the build command, since we have installed this plugin, you can see that index.html was automatically generated, and it has automatically added main bundle.js and some bundle.js, and you can see that our file has been created. Our index.html has been created, and it has the title webpack demo, right? So this is what a plugin allows us to do. It allows us to add some functionality, and using the HTML Webpack plugin, we can, automate the process of um, adding scripts and automatically generate the index HTML file. And there are a lot more configuration options for the HTML Webpack plugin. You can go through those on your own. I just showed you a very basic example. And another thing that you're noticing is that we have lots of additional things which are no longer needed. So whenever we are building it, what we can do is we can make use of the uh, clean option over here and set that to true whenever we are generating the output. So whenever we run the build command, it will basically clean the dist folder, and it has gotten rid of app.js and the other file which was no longer needed, right? So as you can see, you have many configuration options uh, available. And those of you who have worked with React, behind the scenes, create React app or CRA uses Webpack to uh, load React and take care of, basically it's a custom implementation of Webpack which is available as create React app. So those of you familiar with React will find this session useful. And if you don't know what is create React app, don't worry. When we are learning about React next week, we'll be going through that topic. Okay. All right. Now we have seen that every time we are making a change or adding, suppose let me you know create a new file over here, or rather let's use this one, another file.js, and here we want to say something like document dot, not this one, actually we are using some file, right? So let's just say we have this functionality over here that when this file is loaded, we want to create a element. Let's create a button, right? And let's take the reference of this element in this variable, and we want to say button dot text content equals click me, and then we say button dot add event listener click. And when this button is clicked, what we want to do is we just want to log to the console button clicked. And we want to add this button to the body, so we'll say document dot body dot append child button. Okay. Now if you notice over here, I have made some modification, and every time I make a modification, I need to manually run the build command, right? uh, why do we have two buttons? Yeah, because we are importing it and it's also being loaded externally, right? Let me just get rid of this. I'll just keep a single entry point over here. We'll just call it as main, and let's rerun the build command. And now you can see that we have a single button only. So if you notice that I have to manually execute this build command every time I'm making a change. So there's a way by which we can take care of all of this. uh, and another thing is that we're using the live server extension to you know um, host our website on localhost, or rather serve the contents of our site. So using Webpack, you can serve the contents using Webpack, and also Webpack can watch all of the changes which are happening and automatically refresh whenever a file is updated. So let's take a look at how we can do that using Webpack. So in order to do that, we need to make use of something known as Webpack Dev Server. Okay, so let's install that npm I save dev webpack dev server. Okay, so once this is installed, it allows us to run a local server, and Webpack will we can use Webpack to host all of the files in our project. Now this package has been installed. In order to use this, we need to make changes inside Webpack config. So let's add an entry called dev server, and let's provide some options. So we'll say we're using a static server, and the file from where we need to serve the content is available in the dist folder. Okay, and another thing that we need to do is we need to add a optimize. Okay, let me come to that part a bit later on. So in order to use this dev server, what we can do is we can create a script over here. Let's call it as serve, and we'll say over here webpack serve. Okay, and we want to open whenever it starts serving, we want to open that URL in the browser automatically. So for that, we are specifying the open flag, and instead of using this extension live server, which was available in VS Code, now we'll use Webpack to serve all of the files from the dist folder. So let's do that. We will say npm, or rather let's use the start script. So when we use the start script, we don't need to specify the run keyword. We can just say npm start like this, and you can see that it has automatically loaded, it has started serving the contents of the dist folder, right? And it is available on the port 8080. And if we take a look over here, you can also, it also creates makes your website available on your local network. So all the devices which are connected, which are available to all the devices which are on the same network, if you specify this URL, you can access this website on all of those devices which are there on your local networks. For example, even if you're mobile, you can go to your mobile's browser and type this URL, whichever is coming from Webpack. You should be able to access this website when you're on the same network, and view this website on your mobile as well using this URL. Okay, so this is something that Webpack does by default. And now suppose I make a change over here, right? Let me go to some file and let me change the text, click button like this. And if you notice over here, the moment I made this update, I no longer had to run the build command. Webpack did that for me automatically, and the text was updated over here, right? Let's try and change the color over here, change it to royal blue. So this change has been reflected over here, right? And this is the advantage of using a server along with Webpack, that whatever changes we are making, it is automatically reflecting those changes. And the website is also available on the network, or you can use it on localhost also, right? And when I click the button, it is logging that in the console button clicked, right? So as I add more functionality, I modify it, it will automatically serve that file. It will automatically build it, make it available to the dist folder, and Webpack Dev Server will automatically understand that some changes have been made. It will update this and reload this website in the browser. All right. So this is another useful feature of having a tooling, front-end tooling like Webpack available in your project. You get all of these features. You need to configure them once, but whoever is coming on later on, they just need to run a particular command and start working on the functionality, right? So there is another feature available within Webpack, which is known as tree shaking. So suppose we have this this function, we have export function unused function. Okay, let's just say unused. And so basically we are exporting a function, but it's not being imported anywhere in all of these files, so it's an unused export. Now using Webpack, we can implement something known as tree shaking. What that basically means is that whatever is the dead code, right? Webpack will completely ignore that, and it will not be loaded in the browser, and the size of the bundle will not increase because it will ignore that functionality. So this is particularly useful where you might have written lots of code, you might have written a function, but that function is not being used anywhere. So generally when we do not use tree shaking, it will also get that functionality even though it's not being used. And it will increase the size of the file, which will indirectly increase the loading time of the website, because it will take more time to download that resource as the size of the website increases, right? So using tree shaking, we can reduce the size of our bundle by skipping those features which are not being used. So in order to enable tree shaking, just a basic example for this is that you can use the optimization configuration option, and you can say used export true, like this. And we need to, since we made a change in the configuration, we need to rerun the we need to reserve the files, because when you change something in the configuration, webpack is already running with the previous configuration. So you have updated the configuration. In that case, you need to rerun webpack. Okay, so we'll say npm start. uh, Rather than this, actually, to show you the difference, I'll say npm run build. Let's take a look at the dist folder. If we take a look at this main bundle.js and search for unused webpack module, let's just search for that function actually. What was it called? Unused function within our bundle. And you can see that it's telling, hang on a sec. Used exports to true. Did I call this correctly? Optimization. Yeah, used exports to true. Let's do a rebuild. Main bundle. Hang on a sec. Let me just open the website for Webpack. Let's go to the documentation. Let's take a look at tree shaking. Mode needs to be development. Used exports to true. Okay, I think I have, yeah, because I have this statement which is basically importing everything, right? Let me get rid of this, and let me just undo this over here, and let's get rid of the statement, everything. Let's just use this useful function, another variable. Let's get rid of this. Okay. All right. And now if I run the build command, let's take a look at main bundle. Let's search for unused function. So earlier it was giving us, harmony exports. And right now all the things which have not been used, it is not, making it available. Instead, it's just putting this statement, unused harmony. So you'll find all of these statements for functionality which we have not used. So another variable, it's no longer being used. So unused harmony export, that is what you see. Similarly, unused function is something which we are not using. So Webpack is completely skipping all of those things from the module. So the size of the bundle reduces. So it is able to do that using a functionality known as tree shaking. You can read more about it, over here in the documentation for Webpack, but I just wanted to show you an example how the size of the bundle can be reduced using tree shaking and the performance of the website can be improved, right? So I think I have covered decent number of examples and the things that you can do using Webpack. You can load different files, you can create your own development server, serve files from there, watch for all the changes which have been happening. You know, so all of this tooling reduces the development time. You're just doing a one-time configuration, and in the person who was using all of this later on just needs to focus on the functionality and just run some simple commands and everything is just available. Now let's take a look at another tooling option which is available. So I'll just close this for now. Okay, and let me create a new folder over here. Let's call it as day 17 Vite, Vite, pronounced as wheat. It is French for being fast or quick, something like that. Um, Let me open this in VS Code. All right. So Webpack has been around for quite some time, and the support for ES6 modules, as we saw, is now available by default in browsers. So Vite is a modern front-end tooling which uh, you know is built on the idea that we have access to modules by default in browsers. So Webpack was taking care of all of those things behind the scenes. And the thing is, as the size of the project grew, it takes a certain amount of time for that build step to happen. It takes a significant amount of time because it has a lot of functionality which it is trying to provide, uh, which Webpack is trying to provide, which is now supported by default by the built into the browser right now. So Vite takes advantage of all of those things, and the build time is much faster, and it has a lot of other options as well, which makes it very easy to use and set up a project. So let's take a look at how we can make use of Vite. So let's do something. Let's use Vite over here. We will say um, npm create Vite at the rate latest. Okay, so what do we want to, let me zoom this for you guys. So it's asking me a question. What do I want to call this project? So I want to call this project, hang on a sec. Yeah, so I want to call this project as Vite demo, for example. Okay, which framework do I want to use? Right now I want to use vanilla JavaScript. I also have the option to use Vue, React, Preact, Lit, and Svelte. Okay, so I'll go with vanilla because we don't know any of these frameworks at this point of time. Okay, do I want to use JavaScript or TypeScript? So I want to use JavaScript. Okay, so it has created this folder. Let's go to that, cd Vite demo, npm install, and it's installing certain things. Let's take a look at package.json. You can see that it has already added some scripts. There's a dev dependency, which is Vite, and that's it. And if we take a look at the size of node modules, it is much, less compared to the node modules which we had when we were using Webpack, right? And let's run this command npm run dev. Okay, so you can see that by default when we're using Vite, it has, it is serving the contents of our website on this port number. So let's click on this, and if we go to our browser, and if we say localhost 5173, you can see that it's available, and we have some built-in functionality. When I click on this button, it's updating this counter, and yeah, you have some styling as well. So let's take a look. We have this index.html, and you can see that we have this script tag, type as module, and then we're specifying the entry point, which is main.js. If we take a look at main.js, it has this document.query selector. We're getting the app element from, we're getting this element which has the ID app, and we are creating an anchor tag which has the image of Vite, image of JavaScript, hello Vite. There's a div, and then there is this button, and then we are importing setup counter from counter.js, and this is basically incrementing the counter every time we are clicking on this button, right? So if I do a refresh, everything has been reset. As I'm clicking, it's doing that. So you can see that, without doing a lot of configuration and all of those things, I just use this command Vite create, Vite create. Let's go to the documentation. Let's go to the guide, getting started. So was the command which I used, Vite create, npm create Vite. We use the latest version of Vite. You can also use yarn npm. And yeah, we were able to set up the project and have our dev server and all of those things working working by default. So this is the advantage of using something like Vite. um, Most of the things which we had to set up in the configuration, they are available by default. As you can see, we're able to use svg files, right? So if you take a look at main.js, we have imported an svg file like this. By default it is supported. We did not have to add anything in the configuration, any loaders or anything of that sort. It is there by default. Let's try and use a style dot module dot css. So using this, we can add a style, use this style file right within our JavaScript. Let's take a look at how we can do that. Suppose I create a class called red. Okay, and let's just say color red, or rather light red. Let's just use light, dark red. Okay, all right. So this is a special type of file which allows us to use css as a module. So let's import this over here. Import class says from dot slash styles style dot module dot css. Okay, now let me create a new paragraph over here, and let's give this the class red. So what I can say over here is dollar classes. Okay, This is what we have imported from this module.css, and we want to access the class which is called red, right? So by default we have support for a module css file. Let's go to our Vite app, and you can see that this text is now being shown in red. And if I inspect this, you can see that it has some jumbled up name, right? It has applied the red class, but it has this jumbled up name, right? This is the class which we had created, but this is how it's being made available. So this is a functionality which is available when you use modular css. What this allows us to do is that, you know suppose we have another, if you're using vanilla css, and suppose you have let's define the red class over here. So dot red color is red, okay? And suppose I have another file, another css, and it also has a red, and the color for that is say mm, let's say light coral, for example, okay? And we are importing both of these files, style.css as well as another .css, and instead of using classes.red, we are just using red over here. And you can see over here that this has the color red being applied, but it is the red coming from another file, right? The light coral one, that is the color which is being applied. So this problem where the intended thing that you wanted to use is that you wanted to use this red color, but there was another file which also contained uh, uh, rule which has the same name, which is red, and it has a different value of the color red, right? So because of the order in which this file was loaded, name collision happened, and the other red color which was loaded later on, that was picked. To avoid these kind of things, we make use of something known as modular module level css. So what this does is that you import, you define that file with the extension module.css, then you basically have access to this classes variable, and you use the class that you want to uh, you know you can have multiple classes over here. So for example, dot blue, for example, color is royal blue. I want to use that. So what I can just do over here is, instead of saying classes.red, I can say classes.blue, like this. And now you can see that it's it has applied the blue class, and it has changed the name of this class, right? If this same module would be used in another file, you would get a different class name over here. So this avoids name collision, and these kind of conflicts don't happen where if multiple classes are there which are having the same name, their properties do not get overridden. So this is a safer way of writing css using the module way. So Vite has built-in support for using these type of files. So by default there is a lot of built-in support. uh, the project that we'll be building after this session, or in the next session, we'll be using Vite, and we'll learn more features about Vite um, when we're building that project. But I just wanted to give you a high level overview over here that we have a much faster tool available right now, and it makes it much more simpler to get started with a project, because most of the things are built in. You don't need to uh, you know write a lot of configuration. It does have a config file as well for the advanced use cases, but the basic things are just taken care of, right? So yeah, that is it for this session. uh, let's end it over here, and I'll see you guys in the doubt sessions inside the voice channel in Discord, and we'll be meeting in the next session. Tomorrow is a break, and we'll start working on the final project for JavaScript, and starting next week we'll work on React. Okay, so take care and have a great day ahead. I'll see you guys in the next session. Bye bye. So details for the Discord channel are available in the description. Those of you who are, you know, viewing this class for the first time, check out the details for this video to see how you can join the voice channel in Discord.